Okay, Scrafters, I've got a Zerg v Zerg, ZVZ. I suppose I should say it ZVZ because we're not American. But, you know, ZVZ just kind of sounds better, doesn't it? ZVZ sounds a bit weird. I like ZVZ. It's mental, isn't it? Generally, ZVZ. It's a bonkers matchup. So we'll see what happens. We've got PapaFrankZz here in the top right of Lost and Found, and Xeminus in the bottom left. Xeminus cracking out the old extractor trick. I don't know about that unless you've got something very specific in mind. I just don't see the point. But we'll see what is happening. You know, there's still no Overlord coming from Xeminus, so maybe he's just going to get up to fit. Okay, bit weird. PapaFrankZz, not sure what he's at either because he's not using these, so was just saving up for a pool perhaps. But look, you know, there's 150 minerals there. That's 3 drones. Off you go. That's 3 drones that you're not building. So not sure about that either. These 2 overlords just hanging about. Normally as Zerg, you want to do this. You want to send your overlord across the map. Largely just so you can see stuff. You know, you can use it to scout, you can send it into your opponent's base, and until the Zerg has a queen up, there's nothing they've got that can shoot it. So you know, you can normally get in and have a bit of a look around, or you can park it outside so you can see anything coming out, or you can park it over at the edges to look for drops or anything flying in. You can send it around the edge of the map to look for hidden expands. You can park it outside and wait for a bit and send it in a little bit later to have a scout. Double gas for Xeminus, not mining from this one, not sure what he's got in mind, but nobody looks to be doing a desperately early rush. So PapaFrankZz building 6 Zerglings here. No lings in production yet from Xeminus. So this, you know, this could get a bit done. Lings now in production. So these lings, if they go across the map, could definitely get something done, could definitely get a few drone kills, maybe get a surround on the queen and take the queen down. So Xeminus needs to be a little bit careful. No speed researched yet for either player. Spinecrawler finishes up for PapaFrankZz. PapaFrankZz, if you're building a spine in ZVZ, the more standard place to put it would be in here. Because you want to protect your workers if a bunch of lings show up. Here it is easy to surround if you wanted to kill it, but it's easier still to simply run past it. And look, this spinecrawler doesn't protect these workers at all. So, you know, a bunch of speedlings could come in and get a surround or whatever. In a position like this, the lings can't surround it. Or in between sort of minerals and gas, you know, places like that are where you want to put it, so that it's got range over your mineral line, or even just in the middle of the mineral line. Anywho, we've got spinecrawlers additionally coming down for Xeminus. One of the things you sometimes see from Zerg players is a kind of wall off using queens. You find 2 queens effectively blocks a ramp like this, so 2 queens on hold can actually see off a pretty reasonable number of lings, can certainly buy you a lot of time. Again, the position of the spinecrawlers, not so sure about this when you're playing against a Zerg. Okay, these are actually just growing there and they're going to uproot. Yeah, so frontline defenses, but you know, at this early in the game against Zerg, what are you likely to see? You're likely to see speedlings, and speedlings won't stop and fight these. They'll just run straight past them. So unless these are part of a complete wall, I'm not sure about the position of these. Okay, so Lair is finished here for Xeminus, and that gives him access to all sorts of tech. It gives him access to hydras and things like that. There is a roach warren being built on the other side of the map for PapaFrankZz. He doesn't have Lair yet, so when the roach warren finishes up, he will be able to build roaches, but he won't be able to upgrade. He won't be able to get the speed upgrade or the move when burrow upgrade, because both of those require Lair. These lings are going to move out, and speed is almost done for PapaFrankZz, so that should finish up momentarily, and we'll see these lings accelerate as that happens. There we go. And you know, in terms of army supply, there is an advantage. There are now lings up for Xeminus as well, and with these spinecrawlers, he's actually going to be absolutely fine here. There's no easy path to squeeze the lings through without taking a lot of damage. The queens and Xeminus' own lings would get in the way of that. So yeah, defensively looking pretty solid. PapaFrankZz has got his expo up as well. Let's take a peek at the income. Xeminus slightly ahead, but not too stark a difference. Why is that advantage? This main isn't saturated, that's why. And no gas, well, at least no significant gas being mined for PapaFrankZz. So roaches being built, but you know the problem with roaches is they're quite expensive. The roach itself is kind of cheap, but you do find that you need to build a lot of overlords with roaches because they're two supply rather than one. So you've got to factor that in as well, and they do require some gas. So you know, I don't know. PapaFrankZz just doesn't at present have the economy to support significant roach production. A couple of Benlings being morphed in, and a couple already morphed in for Xeminus. And Benlings are brilliant. You know, certainly against Zerglings, Benlings are about as good as it gets, to be honest. Very, very good early game units against Zerglings. So a few of these sort of scattered about, one here, can actually just defend you against an absolute horde of lings. You know, 30, 40 lings coming in, about 4 Benlings is actually sufficient to kind of make sure that doesn't do you an awful lot of damage. If you're playing as if you're the player with the lot of lings and you're up against a few Benlings, what you need to avoid is, you know, if left to your own devices, your lings will attack these Benlings by surrounding them. The Benling detonates and kills all of those lings, and that's extremely bad. So you've got to be really careful with your micro. What you need to do is pull your lings back, select a single ling, and have it attack the Benlings. And if you're the Benling player, you have to make sure your Benlings aren't just on some sort of move command, because if they are, they will detonate against that single ling, and you don't want that. You want them to detonate against a whole host of lings. So quite micro-intensive Benling ling can be. And you know, if you watch a sort of professional ZVZ, you see how insanely good those guys are at doing that, at separating out single units and chasing down the Benlings, at splitting those Zerglings and all of those types of things. Okay, so the lair finished up for PapaFrankZz. That these are the upgrades I was talking about. Roach speed is the sort of go-to if you are playing roaches. Roach speed just hugely increases the value you get from your roaches. I quite like this. I quite like the sort of hidden expo. You don't often get away with it when you're playing against Zerg. Generally because the overlords tend to be spread all over the map. But you know, this is a beginners tournament, and this map is very empty, and neither of the players actually have any sort of vision out on the map. And that is definitely something that, you know, as we move towards round 2, that players could start to look to improve. You know, map control is a big thing in StarCraft. Just having stuff out on the map, on patrol, even if it's just a couple of lings, to give you that early warning about any aggression coming from your opponent, to give you that early warning about any harass, like a drop or anything like that. You know, stuff like that is really worthwhile, and it also means that you find things like this if somebody has gone and dropped a sneaky expand. I mean, don't get me wrong, you don't always. I've lost plenty of games where I've found out watching the replay afterwards that my opponent had like a ninja expand the whole time, and I couldn't understand why the harass I was putting on them and doing economic hurt. You know, how come they're still matching me production wise when I've hurt them? You know, so people do still get away with it even at pro level, but you know, it lowers the chances. Burrowed Benlings here I like a lot. Burrowed Benlings are great. Generally, you want to burrow them in little clusters because of the way they do splash damage. You know, the splash from a Benling is enough to kill lings. So sort of having 3 detonate right next to each other doesn't sort of change the devastation. So having these a little bit spaced out so that their sort of splash radiuses just touch each other rather than overlap is all you need to defend against lings. But I like to see burrowed Benlings. They're cool things. You can have. It's incredibly satisfying if you successfully detonate some Benlings underneath your opponent's army. So PapaFrankZz you know, he's got the ninja expand up, but he's just, I'm a little bit concerned that he isn't saturating his bases. You know, the 12 workers in the men is now the correct amount of workers, but look, you know, this natural expand has been up and mining for ages, and it's still not saturated. And there's, you know, there's easy opportunity to do so. There are spare larvae to be had here, and there just isn't anything in production. You know, you've got the facilities, you've got the stuff you need to build some tech, but you're not building anything. So, you know, really important in StarCraft to turn the minerals that you mine into stuff. What you want is a high-speed economy as Zerg. You want to get your economy up, and you want a big income, and you want to constantly be turning it into units. In general, you don't find that supply blocks you, because you tend to be aggressive. You know, you lose those units, and you turn those units into damage onto your opponent's economy, so that you can simply outgrow them, and then when the time is right, crush them. Anywho, a macro game is what we're seeing here. I'd like to see Xeminus on 3 or 4 bases by now, and arguably the same for PapaFrankZz. You know, don't dilly-dally. Zerg hatcheries are reasonably cheap, and bear in mind, the more hatcheries you have, the more units you are capable of producing simultaneously. You know, so you do have to have a high hatchery count as Zerg. You have to have a higher base count than you would as sort of Terran or Protoss, that's for sure. So the Mutalisks are coming. PapaFrankZz doesn't appear to be instantly responding to that. There are Hydralisks being built, and Hydras are very good against Mutas. But you know, as soon as you know there's Mutas on the map as a Zerg, your first reaction is generally to throw down some Spore Crawlers in your mineral lines, because that can defend very nicely against that. Has pulled the whole army to chase these, and weirdly there's benefit to that, and I'll explain. You know, roaches don't shoot up, Hydras do, but he doesn't actually have very many Hydralisks. Mutalisks do a sort of splash damage, where what they shoot bounces. Look, the first hit does 9 damage, then it bounces, and the second hit I think does less damage, and then it bounces again, and the third hit does like very little damage. But you see these shots, see the way they're bouncing off the queen and then hitting something else. If you've got a relatively low Hydra count, you want the Hydras to stay alive. So by having the roaches with them as they fight the Mutas, the roaches simply absorb some of those ricochet shots. So the Mutas AI will automatically target the things that are shooting them. So it'll automatically target the Hydralisks. But the roaches are there to absorb the ricochets. The other thing you can do is turn these into Ravagers, and that can be really effective against Mutas as well. If the Mutas stay still, the Corrosive Bile comes down and does a lot of damage to them. And if they don't stay still, well, you can use the Corrosive Biles to kind of zone the Mutas out to force your opponent to keep them on the move. So the Spore Crawler here, Spore Crawlers are good against Mutas, but the positioning isn't quite right. You know, it's just not protecting these workers. On the flip side of that, you know, PapaFrankZz has some quite nice stuttering going on there with from Xeminus, just doing that sort of move. Essentially in the same way that you stutter step Marines, but at a much slower sort of rhythm. So you move, stop, move, stop, move, stop, so that you effectively shoot kind of while moving. Mutas have to stop in order to shoot. Yeah, there you see. So in general, the way you do it is you're right clicking on the map to move them, and then you're tapping the S key to stop, and then right clicking as soon as they've fired. So you've only got to momentarily stop them. And the effect is that they kind of don't really stop. They not quite shoot as moving, but you know, you get the idea. Anyway, PapaFrankZz, how are you doing? You've got an awful lot of money, and you've got a fair amount of units, but you know, a Civ, the Muta harass, we've not really seen much in the way of aggression. I'd like to see these Lings being active. You know, we had a quick look in here in the early stage of the game and then pulled back. But you've got to think to yourself, well, my opponent must be up on 3 bases by now. Second Spore Crawler building, but you know, again, it's just not in the right place. Why not back here where your workers should be? If you are harassed by things like Mutalisks, you lose some workers. You know, don't forget to rebuild them. Okay, lots of minerals. But you do need to match that gas, and at present, only one worker mining gas for PapaFrank's on the whole map across these 3 bases. Well, let's, look at this gas income. Look at it, it's going up by about 4 gas every 5 seconds or something. That's miserable. You're not going to build a winning army with that little income. Xeminus, Xeminus. What is Xeminus doing? I'm not really sure. It looks like air. There's a whole. It's a bit of a confused build in terms of there's a bit of everything. We've got some swarm hosts making their way across the map. I don't. I'm kind of not necessarily suggesting that having a bit of everything is strongly negative, but it does tend to spread your upgrades and things like that a bit thin. But, in these early stages of the tournament, people getting used to units, it's quite good fun to try out a bunch of different units and stuff. And it's certainly nice to see a game that hasn't been dominated by, proxies and cheeses and things like that for a change. So the mutants come in here and do get a lot of work done. If we have a look at the workers killed, we can see 12 workers have gone down. Focus in the infestation pit, and the lair is already being produced. Now, I'm not sure if PapaFrank's actually was going to use the infestation pit for any purpose other than just to get lair tech. You need an infestation pit to go from hive to lair. But it also enables production of infestors, and infestors are pretty good. Certainly they can be effective against mutalisks and various other things. So infestors at the simplest level shoot out things like fungal growth, which kind of covers your opponent's stuff in, I don't know, some sort of gunk that makes them move much more slowly than they otherwise would, and also deals damage to them over time. So it used to be the case that fungals froze units in place, and that was very effective against mutalisks, because if you had a couple of infestors, you could just throw one fungal after the other onto the mutalisks and kill them. These days, though, it just slows down the movement, so it doesn't quite work to the same effect, but it can slow the mutalisks enough that your hydras can catch up with them and gun them down. So, PapaFrank's, what are you building? You've got Zerglings in production. I don't quite get that. You see the mutalisks, and they're the major thorn in your side at present. The one unit that you've got that kills those is hydras. So why wouldn't you be building more hydralisks aside from being starved for gas? These swarm hosts actually getting a little bit done. The swarm hosts are like siege units, and they can fire these flying locusts into your opponent's base. And you can use that to focus on buildings and stuff. In general, you need a few more than 3 to be really effective. You don't need to go absolutely ham, but if you've got 8 or 9 of them, you can get a surprising amount of work done with that. Just firing the locusts in and focusing down something like the hydralist down, as to prevent your opponent building the counter to whatever you've got. So Xeminus finally coming in now for the big push. Let's have a look at how he does. Lings splitting into these spine crawlers. And Lings at this stage of the game are completely throwaway, so anything they get done is great. You can use that as a distraction as well. You can come around the back here while the Lings are working the front and have at this. PapaFrank's army parked here, and he needs to split really. He needs to send the hydras up into the main to protect against the mutalisks and leave the roaches at the front door. You don't want to lose your hive and hydralisk then. That would be very, very poor. We can see in production there is an ultralisk, and ultralisks are great, but guess what? They don't shoot up. They won't fix these mutalisks that keep on coming in and ruining your day. So not sure about some of these choices. Broodlords in production now for Xeminus, and Broodlords will end the game pretty quickly. Broodlords are hard, very hard things to deal with. We'll see what they do momentarily. They basically shoot out little broodlings that are... Imagine a unit that just shoots out Zerglings for free. It can shoot them a long way, so they have phenomenal range, and it shoots them out in large numbers. Broodlords are difficult to deal with at the best of times. all the more difficult to deal with if you don't have anything that shoots air. So PapaFrankZz is going to move across the map and go and counter, and that's about all he can do. You know, this is the major problem. 5,500 minerals, but just no gas, because for the longest time there just weren't any workers mining gas. Here we see the Broodlords going to work. They will clear this base out remarkably quickly. So it's going to come down to almost perhaps even a base trade here. We'll see what happens. PapaFrankZz moving in, has got a reasonable amount of army, but so has Xeminus, but Xeminus's army is all over here, and it's in the form of Broodlords and expensive things like that. These spine crawlers are going to slow things down. There's a bunch of roaches here as well that will certainly reduce the numbers in this army, but it looks like oh no, I don't think he does actually. I think Xeminus is just going to hold. It's despite these lings just sort of dancing about at the back. So, and with these Benlings as well, that's definitely game over. So, I expect a GG, and there it is. Xeminus victorious. Yes. Okay, let's crack on to game 2.